Welcome back to the Brody Windsor Group podcast, where we go beyond the transaction to talk about the issues that shape our communities. Today, we're sitting down with Beaconsfield resident and city councillor Martin St. Jean, who's running for mayor of Beaconsfield in the upcoming municipal election on Sunday, November 2nd. In this conversation, we'll explore Martin's vision for Beaconsfield's future, how he sees development, transparency, communication, and fiscal responsibility evolving in our city, and what kind of leadership he believes Beaconsfield needs next. Whether you're a lifelong resident or a new homeowner, we hope this episode helps you make a more informed decision when you head to the polls. Thanks for pressing play. You're listening to the Brody Windsor Group on Real Estate, the podcast for homeowners seeking guidance and support on everything related to owning a home. This includes much more than just buying or selling. We've got you covered for everything from mortgages and financing to home maintenance tips, renovation and design advice, and of course, the latest insights and analysis on what's happening in our local communities. Good morning, Martin. Welcome to the show, and thank you very much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Before we get into the nitty-gritty of municipal election issues, I wanted to first just ask you to tell us a little bit about your past experience. You are the only mayoral candidate with previous city council experience, having been a councillor here in Beaconsfield for the last 4 years. Maybe touch a little bit about how that has shaped your views and ideas. Maybe touch on some things that you're most proud of that the city has accomplished while you were part of the council, and some things maybe that you would like to change or see improved for the future.
Well, thank you. That's a very important question. I think what people need to realize is that I'm a longstanding resident of Beaconsfield. I've lived here with my family since 2009, so 16 years. My background, as a lot of people know, but for those who don't, I'm a lawyer by trade. I've been practicing for over 25 years as a second career. I used to be a teacher before that. And the last 15 years of which have been dedicated to municipal law. I've worked in Montreal. I was given the mandate to represent the city at the Charbonneau Inquiry, the famous commission on public contracts and the management of those contracts. That was life-changing for me in the sense that it brought me to develop an interest in ethics and good governance, among other things. And then after that, I moved to Westmount, where I was the director of legal services and city clerk for 4 years. And so in 2019, I returned to private practice. I've decided to wind down my work schedule to devote more of my time to my family, my kids who are growing up at the time, and they're still growing up. But eventually what that led me to consider in 2021 was to run for council, to put some of that experience that I have that's very specific to municipal law, governance, ethics, and make myself available to our community as a city councillor. And I was fortunate and very thankful that I had the opportunity to sit on council for the last 4 years. Back in 2021, a lot of people were asking, well, what's your background? Why aren't you running for mayor at the time? And I thought, and I still believe, that to come in without prior experience as a city councillor is not something that is necessarily a prerequisite, but it certainly helps to understand the culture around the table, to understand the relationship between the administration and council. It also provides an overall view of what are the issues from within. As residents, and I hear that from a lot of residents, we have preconceived ideas as to how things are ran and how things should be, ran as well. And I think fundamentally what we need to understand is that there's a process to everything. And oftentimes when you share with residents what are some of the conversations, without getting into the specifics of the conversations we've had around the table, people realize that, well, things are actually going pretty well. And so I moved now, 4 years after the fact, with the thought that I have a better grasp of the main issues that we were facing. And that's something that I didn't have 4 years ago. And I think that is something that gives me a little bit of an advantage to be able to hit the ground running on November 3rd, if elected. Now, in terms of some of the things that I'm most proud of is I think that we are getting in a process where some of the main issues, and I say issues, I don't mean necessarily problems, but some of the main dossiers that we have to tackle, there's already a better sense of where we're going, what we need to do. We've pushed forward with the Imagine project, and I think you'll probably want to circle back to that later on. The new cultural center that is being designed and developed at Centennial Park and Marina.
And a lot of time and effort was put into the planning of that project in conjunction with, consulting with the residents to make sure that what was being proposed and what finally gets approved is something that will appeal to the broadest population. Is that correct?
Absolutely, 100%. And it's not something that was just started, in 2021. It started probably uh, the first sort of mentions or considerations date back to around 2010, 2012. So it's been a long process. There's been hurdles along the way, but eventually we're really on track now to push that forward.
Because this is probably a misconception that a lot of people have, right? Is how long things actually take, the process that you alluded to earlier, right? And I think that must be one of your biggest challenges as a municipal council is to prioritize which issues get the funding, for example, which issues are going to get support over others, and in the order in which things happen. That I think is very difficult for most residents to understand if you're not deeply involved in the process and how it works.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, we have a population of about 19,500, and on the spectrum, the needs and requirements of all of our population is not necessarily always 100% perfectly aligned.
Mhm.
So some people come into council with the view of, I say it in jest, but to initiate some sort of revolution, whereas what fundamentally needs to be addressed is a constant evolution, and the process of evolution takes time. It needs to be done perfectly. It needs to be done as well as possible, if not perfectly. So eh, there's budget considerations when you want to consider projects to be achieved. There's also social acceptability. Before you might come in and you have, what you think is a splendid idea, and it might require some time to gauge what the population actually wants. I mean, no one should be uh, an island unto themselves, and we live in a community. We need to make sure that what we deliver in terms of services reaches as many people as possible. That we have different people from different walks of life with different needs in terms of age, group, cultural backgrounds, so on and so forth. So patience is essential. It's something that I think needs to be constantly, on the forefront, and we need to remind our residents, our citizens, our neighbors that, well, Rome wasn't built in one day. Beaconsfield won't be built or changed in one day, and that's a good thing.
Absolutely.
That's a good thing.
And that's a good point you raised earlier too, which is there's budget constraints, right? Now Beaconsfield is unique in that instance where, unlike other municipalities like Kirkland, Pointe Claire, Dorval, we don't have that industrial commercial tax base that the other municipalities have. So there's the tax burden falls primarily on the residents, right? You and I.
Yes.
And so I've read your sort of platform and different interviews that you've done regarding your views on densification, and that term means different things to different
Yeah.
people. Some people, they hear that word and they think automatically high-rise buildings and small condos, and they automatically think, no, not in my backyard. You hear that
Not in
a
my
lot.
backyard is something that comes back to us a lot with regards to densification, but also with a lot of the different issues.
Exactly.
Right?
And so on the flip side of that coin is the affordability issue, the lack of housing supply for various population demographic types. Here in Beaconsfield, you've got an aging population,
Yes.
a lot of soon to be downsizers, empty nesters living in larger homes. But their complaint that we hear as real estate professionals is, where do I go? Where do I go? And how are we planning? So I'd love to hear your thoughts on ideas for how we can improve that and give options for the seniors as well as young people who want to stay in and around Beaconsfield where they grew up, and try and balance the two.
Yes. I think the first thing I'd like to do when we speak of densification is to ease or appease some of the worries that I've heard about this, because you're right, it means different things for different people. And so densification here in Beaconsfield can't mean the same thing that it's meant in Pointe Claire, Kirkland, Dollard des Ormeaux, and the list of municipalities like that can be long. So when we speak of densification, first of all, it's a word that comes from a top level of government down to Beaconsfield at the bottom of the scale, if you want. So the Quebec government has this idea that densification needs to happen. It's given the mandate to the Montreal urban community to consider it. It has developed in 2015 a PMAD. The acronym is more or less important, a document in which it told its municipalities, well, you need to make sure that you meet certain requirements in terms of density. And then we're in the process of seeing a second iteration of a PMAD being adopted, being implemented, which means that the Montreal agglomeration will have to concord with that plan. And as a trickle-down effect, municipalities such as Beaconsfield, part of the agglo, will also have to meet those requirements. Now, just to give people's perspective, I think it's urgent that we take our time in terms of how we do it and where we do it and when we do it. To give a little bit of perspective, the 2015 agglo or the 2017 agglo schema that was adopted as a result of the initial PMAD, we just finished in 2025, a few months ago, our concordance bylaws to be in sync with it. And so whatever density will mean, we have plenty of time to figure it out. I agree 100% with you. We have, you've spoken of our seniors who would like to stay in our community and whom would love to keep as, thriving members of our community. That's true. We need to find some areas where they can downsize, move into a 2 or 3 bedroom unit if available. It's also true for people who want to enter the real estate market, who want to come into our community, or oftentimes come back to our community. We have a lot of young families who are looking at coming back to Beaconsfield because this is where they grew up. They left for work or because they were studying out of province, out of island, and they'd love to come back and settle and
Yeah, to start a family, because
okay.
we see that a lot where we've got young people who we always advise them, get in the market as soon as you can.
Exactly.
Right.
Okay.
So today, what that means is you hear the term drive until you
Bye.
drive until you're approved, right? It's like basically the further afield you would go, the easier it would be to get mortgage approval to be able to get yourself into the market, and then build up some equity, and then hopefully then be able to move back closer to on island communities that are obviously a little bit more expensive.
So I think we need, without changing the outlook of Beaconsfield, which is, and as far as I'm concerned, should remain a community based mostly on single family dwellings. This type of neighborhood that we have, this is the type of environment I think that I want to keep, and I think most people would like to keep. It's what brings the appeal for a lot of people to either stay or move to Beaconsfield. Now, having said that, we were talking about the seniors that might want to downsize. There are also couples or young families that are looking into moving into Beaconsfield, and they find that they're being priced
Out of the market.
out of the market. Exactly. So I think, if we want to have a balanced community where seniors can stay and younger families can move in, we need to act so that uh, this is becoming, something that's possible. Our population, if you look statistically for the last 15 years, has bounced around 19,000 to 19,700 people up and down in that bracket for the last 15, 16 years.
Where are some areas in Beaconsfield that you believe are good opportunities for starting this densification process? And what does that look like? I've heard you talk about mixed use, where you're combining commercial space with residential space. Where in Beaconsfield would that be possible?
Well, we've already, as I've mentioned earlier, we've done some zoning changes in the last year to concord with the 2015 original PMAD. And so far, what we've identified as areas of potential densification, because just because you change the zoning, it doesn't mean that things will mushroom out of the ground, overnight.
Right.
But here, the Beaurepaire village is an area where potential densification would be done. We've identified around the Beaconsfield shopping mall, the Metro, the Pharmaprix, and the Beaconsfield train station, for example, are areas. And over there, we already have the Adamus, what's known as the Adamus project that has started. It's been stalled for a
Yeah.
number of years, but
So a lot of problems and issues with that particular development, and I think the city has learned a little bit about making sure that that doesn't happen again.
well, as a result, one of the things that we did in the last 4 years was to make modifications to our bylaws so that there are financial incentives for promoters to carry out the work that they come to see us with in the time frame that they've provided us.
Right.
Because if we take this as an example, Adamus is a problem for everyone. This
Maybe
needs to
just
be the
explain
resident.
for those that aren't aware what exactly happened there in a nutshell.
Well, in a nutshell, what I can tell you that is public is that the original owner came into financial difficulties with the people who were backing the project from a financial standpoint. So it stalled for that reason.
Right.
And as a result, I think it was probably in the spring of 2024, if my memory serves me right, there was a judicial sale process which saw a new owner take the project and run with it. The great news is that in the last year or so, we've, as a council, we've approved, the different projects that were presented, and so now it's just a matter of the promoter, the owner, to get the appropriate building permits to carry out the work.
Oh, that's good.
So we have. I think we're closer to seeing this project coming to fruition than we have been waiting for it to materialize.
And what's your take on the other proposed project with the Elm Plaza? And I know that that was, again, the property was sold to a developer who had plans to put some project together. It was then presented to council, who then opened it up for a public consultation.
That's correct. Yeah.
And then what happened, and what have we learned, in going through this process?
Well, I think if anyone learned a lesson, it was the promoter. So what happened was that, as is the case for every file like this one, where zoning variances are requested, the law triggers a referendum process. We'll just call it that.
Yep.
There's several steps along the way, and the local population felt that it was a project that didn't meet its community needs. And eventually we were on track to actually have to hold a referendum. And this type of adventure is divisive in the community setting. And so what council decided to do was to essentially rescind its approval of the project so that the community and the promoter have a chance to perhaps better align what the needs of the one is or are with what the needs of the community.
So what would your advice be for the future? Again, if you become mayor,
Yeah.
in advising both promoters and residents on how to avoid that conflict and divisive situation from occurring in the first place by maybe having consultations before a project is even
I think
put on
before
paper.
it's an excellent question, and I think although it's not the job of a mayor or any elected officials to give advice to promoters, I think the lesson here is that if you want to have success, and it's true of promoters, and it's true of municipalities, and in Beaconsfield, if you want to move something forward, communicate, communicate, communicate. Do it.
Yeah.
Do it. And communicate means listening, listening and adapting. You can't come in with a pre-made plan and say, this is it. This is the option.
Shove it down people's throats.
Well, shove it down people's throat is one way to say it. But so if you want to have local population buy-in, they need to be part of the process early on, so that it's reflective of the community's needs and respectful of the community's needs.
You need communication early on in the process. And I think sometimes the mistakes in the past have been the communication comes too late in the process when you're already at referendum level where emotions are high and people are thinking, oh my God,
Yes.
this is already a fait accompli.
Yes.
Why wasn't I consulted earlier on?
So to have success, in my opinion, you need to have a project that adapts to your environment, to your community. It should be the promoter's project that adapts to the environment, to the community, and not the other way around. And I think that's a fundamental issue that perhaps, in this particular instance, was encountered. And so we go back to the, communication and the importance of it. I think it's true for third parties trying to come into our community to present a project, but it's also true of our city council and administration in terms of what we're driving at, what we want to achieve.
This is a great point you've mentioned as well, and other candidates have also brought this to the table as something that's a key election issue this year, which is transparency. And if I'm a resident and I'm going to a city council meeting, oftentimes what I'm listening to, what I'm hearing, are decisions that have been made previously, maybe behind closed doors in caucus meetings, and I'm not really getting the full context of what the decision was, how it was made. And so I'm hearing more people talk about minutes of those caucus meetings should be made public. And I think with technology today should be easier than it was in the past to do that. And of course, I've heard, you cannot just publish everything because there could be sensitive information that needs to be redacted from the minutes. But what's your view and take on that?
Well, my view is a longstanding one on this issue. I ran in 2021 as a city councilor, hoping to bring such a change into our community life. So far, we are broadcasting the information the same way we have. It's something that's done in other municipalities, and I know that it can be applied here in Beaconsfield. I, 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 I think what we need to keep in mind is that there are good things that Beaconsfield is doing that needs to be broadcasted to other municipalities. But there are also things that other municipalities do well that I'm aware of that can be incorporated into our way of doing things. And one of them is about broadcasting, um, succinctly the uh, conversations or topics, not the conversations. That I need to be careful because that's exactly what worries a lot of people. As a member of council or a member of the administration, the idea is not to come back with a verbatim of what's been discussed,
Not a transcript.
not the Hansard from the House of Commons,
Yeah.
but we could easily have a list of topics that we've addressed. What is, for example, the consensus with respect to that topic? What are the next step? Are we going to study it further? Are we going to give the mandate for the administration to do X, Y, and Z? And so just that, when we end up discussing issues publicly, on the agenda for council meetings, it's not something that is completely, totally, for a lot of people, coming out of left field.
Exactly. And wouldn't that would then, help inform the population, right? And that's, I think, going to reduce the amount of divisiveness and conflict among people. As if you don't understand how the decision was made, that frustrates people.
Absolutely. And this is where, for example, my experience in Westmount, just to name this one, Westmount has been making its caucus meetings, they're called general committee meetings in Westmount. It's been made available to the public for 10 years now. They're on the website, they get adopted, reviewed by council, and then eventually put on their website. So that's an easy example of how it can be done. I mean, there's other ways to do it. It doesn't have to be the Westmount model, but it illustrates that it's been done. And as far as I can tell, council functions in Westmount, and it did not have a detrimental impact on how civic life is being conducted.
Yeah.
On the contrary, another way that we can um, more successfully get people to understand and participate in civic life is the type of information at council meetings that we make available. Too often, we will have our city clerk name an item on the agenda. For example, the award of a contract for company X, Y, and Z in an amount of $1.5 million for the refurbishment of city streets throughout the territory. That's fantastic. And then, one of us will say, I propose, the other one seconds, and then we vote and we move on. We've just spent $1.5 million of our taxpayers' money, your taxpayers' money, my taxpayers' money. I mean, I'll redo that. We've just spent $1.5 million of taxpayers' money. Your taxes, my taxes, everybody's taxes. But what do we know really about what we just did at council? We don't know a lot. So perhaps we could tell people this is in line with the estimate that we have internally. Or if it's not, if it's higher by 10, 15%, perhaps explain, the market conditions at the time. We could easily take a moment to explain that this work will be conducted in one specific sector or several specific sectors throughout the summer, and so on and so forth.
I think most people would agree that, they don't mind paying taxes as long as they know how those taxes are being spent and if they're being spent prudently and responsibly.
One of the questions that comes back often is, where's my money going?
Exactly.
What are you doing with my money? So I think we could, we could improve on making this kind of information available.
So another issue I hear a lot from residents is the issue of new construction. And I'm talking about private property, new construction, demolition, permits, new construction, and the ambiguity and, sort of lack of clear guidelines, I think, could be the way to describe it. I'd just like to get your thoughts on whether you feel there's any areas for improvement in that area of municipal, um, process and regulations.
Well, that's unfortunately, that's an issue that is not proper to Beaconsfield. That's something that I think everybody in every municipality, when you come to the counter with your project and you've been designing it and thinking about it and dreaming of it for a while before you actually move forward, you, a lot of people will find it frustrating that they can't get their baby project going on as quickly as they'd like to. Um, I think our residents need to understand that the first step in a project like that, if we're at the construction stage or just before, yes, there's the demolition in some cases, but that's the rare case. A lot of the projects that people feel a little bit of frustration about are mostly major renovations. And so what happens is that you have to present your project to the city, and the city has a committee. This bylaw, its goal is for new constructions or major renovations, facades or extensions. The aim is that it fits in to the streetscape, the neighborhood as much as possible. And we have recommendations from a committee, the Public Advisory Committee, which is made up of 7 residents. And there are guidelines, but they're not strict guidelines. They are, I mean, if we take a moment to consider the zoning bylaw with setbacks and heights and this and that, this is normative. If you don't, if your project does not meet that, well, you can't go ahead.
It's black and white.
It's black and white. Whereas the architectural integration of a residence or of a project, well, it's subjective to a large extent. And so the first step is to try and get a consensus amongst the residents. And the reason why we have residents on the committee is because, well, we want to hear with Monsieur, Madame, tout le monde, how does one feel about this being on that street when you look at properties on the left, properties on the right? And so that's important. And they make recommendations. And I think that as a council, we show a lot of deference to the committee. Its role is to guide us and to tell us how it feels about a property. So it's common for a project to come back maybe 2, 3 times. Rarely do we go, but it happens 4 to 5, 6 times. Sometimes people really, really hope to have what they initially came with. And for a number of reasons, it depends on the project. It's not something that passes the eye test from our residence member, but their input is very important. And so that's the process. Now, how do we improve that? I mean, because it's not normative, because it's very subjective, and I can tell you that oftentimes, I look at a project and I'm like, oh, okay, personally, I would like that, but a number of people around the table don't necessarily feel the same way. And it's really, really that, I mean, there are files that are easy, you look at it and it's like, wow, that really encapsulates the look, the feel of the neighborhood.
Yeah. I think it's the gray areas, I guess, that frustrate people, where it's like, well, how did that one get approved and mine didn't? And they don't really see, well, how are those decisions being made? And like you said, there's no normative guidelines, it's subjective guidelines. But anyway, not much we can do if we're using committees to make those decisions.
Well, and that's that's the great thing. I mean, we want neighborhoods and our community to look like what residents want. And I mean, we have 7 members on that specific committee. Perhaps if we went, and I'm not suggesting we are, but perhaps if we went up to 20 or 30, the look and feel would be different. I don't know that. But I think also what we would end up with is a quagmire of moving forward.
Yeah,
You don't want
decisions
to.
by consensus is always difficult.
It takes more time.
Takes
So
lots of
if
time.
the idea is to get an answer more quickly, even if the answer is not the one that you expected, well, I think that the committee that we have, our public advisory committee, or CCU in French,
Yeah.
is doing just fine.
Well, I think all this, like you mentioned, all the municipalities are having similar
Yeah.
difficulties and issues with this. Let's switch gears for a moment. I want to touch back on your experience with the city of Montreal and specifically your experience as a lawyer.
Yeah.
When we talk about the agglomeration
Oh,
and the city of Beaconsfield's lawsuit and how that's progressing, do you have any thoughts and ideas on how that should be handled leading into the future and the next mayor's mandate?
well, there are two things. First, there's the lawsuit.
Yeah.
That we could talk about, as a single issue. The lawsuit, I think, is a very good idea of the previous council. It was initiated in 2020. At the time, what was meant to be just temporary calculation of our share of the AGLU budget became, by decree, permanent. And so that meant that a contract that the city of Beaconsfield and all the demerged municipalities had entered into with Montreal and the Quebec government was by decree just shoved aside. And fundamentally, that's not correct. So we're leading a good fight on that. And the good news is that the file is waiting for trial dates. There's nothing to improve. There's no new tack to consider. The job's been done. The city has hired competent lawyers to move that file forward, and we're waiting to be summoned. I think that's the word, by the court, and say, okay, your file is ready, Montreal. Your file is ready, Beaconsfield. Here are the dates that we have. And so when we have that, we'll be able to report when the trial will take place. Will there be consultations? Will there be negotiations? Perhaps. But so far, there's been no inclination from Montreal Spark to sit down at the table and have a dialogue with us on the merit of this file. And I think we need to be careful. We're plaintiff in this file. We shouldn't be in a position where we broadcast that we want to settle. We want to settle at a discount or quickly. Some things take time, and we need to allow that time to pass for things to move forward. At some point, perhaps Montreal will realize that, and I think they have, and that's why they're in no hurry to sit down and talk to us. We have a good file. We have a strong legal file. Is there a guarantee that we'll win? No. I have the utmost respect for our judicial system. However, there's a court of appeal and there's a Supreme Court, and there's a reason for that. So I think on the legal battle, we're in a good position. And if there's a settlement to be considered, it needs to be to Beaconsfield advantage, not out of a need to move away from that file quickly. Having said that, I think that there's another issue, and you brought it up. What is the role of Beaconsfield and other demerged municipalities within the AGLO? Right now, frankly, it's a sham of democracy. It can't be even called that. No matter what we say, no matter what we do, no matter what position we adopt, either as a city or as a group of demerged municipality, the way the AGLO is organized, if City Council in Montreal adopts a resolution and then this file is brought to the AGLO, well, the die is cast. There's nothing that can be done. And so really it's just a smoke show, the AGLO meetings, the way it's currently organized. It's a travesty of democracy. You have at city council in Montreal the opposition, because for good or bad reasons, they have, a party system in the big city. So you have opposition members who will be fighting against the adoption of specific resolution. But once Montreal adopts that resolution, the law governing the aglo is drafted in such a way that on the Monday evening at a city council meeting in Montreal, you're against what is being proposed, but because you sit on the aglo council meeting, well, suddenly you have to vote in favor alongside Montreal's majority.
Yeah.
And so that leaves us with 17% of the vote. It's essentially meaning that
Meaningless.
we don't have one.
Right.
We don't have a voice. And so I looked at, and again, because I'm a lawyer, but I think it's important. There's a movement. Montreal's not the only agglomeration in Quebec. In Longueuil, they have similar governance issues that we have here on the island of Montreal. And there's a lawsuit that's been launched where we're hoping that eventually, at the very least, you and I, as people administered by the aglo, will have the same weight as residents of Montreal who are also administered by the aglo and have a say, at least at the aglo level, in electing the aglo council.
I was going to ask, are there other municipalities in a similar position to Beaconsfield who have joined in and filed a lawsuit as well to strengthen that
here
fight
on the
in
island
the island of Montreal?
So far, Beaconsfield is the only city that is involved in the litigation. Perhaps because Beaconsfield's we talked about this earlier, 95% of our tax base is residential. That's unique on the island. That's unique on the island. So
you have more to lose, is that it?
well, the calculation change has more negatively impacted us than it did any other municipality. However, our conclusions would benefit all of the demerged municipalities. I say
Would that be something you would propose as mayor, is to get together and have those conversations with other demerged municipalities and come with a unified voice?
My understanding, and is to be confirmed, is that this has already been done by Mayor Bourrel with his colleagues. There might be other reasons as to why other municipalities and their leadership have not joined our legal battle. But one thing is certain: this lawsuit would solve current issues and past issues in terms of the unfair taxation or CUTPA we've had to pay. It wouldn't solve the future. And this is where I think cooperation with our other colleagues from demerged municipalities will come into play. We need to have strong leadership and a unified front if we're going to take the battle to the aglo, but probably more importantly, to the Quebec government, because this is where decisions will be made.
Martin, this has been a very, very interesting conversation. I want to thank you for joining me today. Now, where can voters go to read more about your ideas in your platform?
Thank you for inviting me. It's been a pleasure. I'm going door to door, so a lot of people will have a chance to see me. Unfortunately, I won't be able to reach all 6,700, houses or apartments that we have on the territory. I invite people to reach out to me by phone, email, on my Facebook page, on my website, and the information can be found in the brochure that I have that's been distributed or being distributed. You can also find my coordinates on all of my signs throughout the territory. And I really want to stress the importance of voting. Historically, we have low voter turnout at municipal elections. This particular time, it's important that people go out and vote. Right now, as we stand, we know for sure that there'll be a new mayor. We know for sure that at least 2 of the 6 councillor seats will bring new people in, and perhaps more faces will come in. So you do have a choice. I invite you to familiarize yourself with my platform and that of all the candidates.
Yeah.
I think it's fundamentally important that we have as high a participation rate as possible. So thank you again for the opportunity.
Excellent. Thanks very much and good luck.
Thank you very much.
November 2nd. All right, take care. That was our conversation with Beaconsfield mayoral candidate Martin Saint-Jean. Whether or not you agree with every idea, what's clear is that our community is stronger when residents and leaders talk openly about the issues that matter most: growth, transparency, and how we shape the next chapter of our city together. Election day is Sunday, November 2nd, so make sure your voice is heard. Thanks for listening to the Brody Windsor Group podcast. If you found this episode helpful, share it with a neighbor and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.